Hello and welcome to Court Corner. I am Ashmit Kumar. As someone who has been a part of judgments that paved the way for a Ram temple at the disputed site in Ayodhya, upheld privacy as a fundamental right and decriminalized unnatural sex, Justice DY Chandrachud's 8-year stint at the Supreme Court has undoubtedly been an impactful one. During his last 2 years as the Chief Justice, the longest tenure in the last 12 years, Justice Chandrachud sat on benches that passed a number of landmark judgments. These include terming the electoral bond scheme as unconstitutional, refusal to give legal sanctity to same-sex marriages instead of leaving it to the Parliament's discretion. Over the next half an hour, we will be discussing the tenure of CJI, Justice Chandrachud, and decode what his legacy would be. But before that, we bring to you visuals of an emotional last working day for Chief Justice DY Chandrachud, who retires on the 10th of November. Justice Chandrachud got emotional and could be seen wiping tears as Justice Narasimha nailed his extraordinary ability as a lawyer.
I had the great opportunity of appearing before him and also sitting with him.
Yes, well, that's...
I must say that at both instances I failed to come up to, as a lawyer, extraordinary ability, as a judge, extraordinary ability, as we were all appearing from the bar, and his patience, his participation in the proceedings, whoever appears, it was amazing.
You asked me, what keeps me going. It's this court which has kept me going. Because there's not a single day when you feel that you have not learned something, that you have not had an opportunity to serve society. And there's no greater feeling for a judge than to be able to serve those in need. If I ever hurt any one of you, I would like to just say Michhami Dukadam. Please forgive me for something which I didn't intend to ever say or do.
Well, to take this discussion ahead, I'm now joined by Anuradha Dutt, Managing Partner, DMD Advocates, Alok Prasanna, Co-founder, Vidhi Center for Legal Policy, and Sherbir Panag, Founder and Managing Partner at Panag Babu. Thank you so much for joining us, being a part of this discussion. Ms. Dutt, let me come to you. You have the unique distinction of being one of the few lawyers who've argued before him in the Bombay High Court when he used to sit in court number 40, also having argued before him in the top court in his capacity as the Chief Justice of India. I remember reporting out of the Bombay High Court in his very early days. There was already conversation in hushed tones in the corridors of the Bombay High Court with people saying that this man is sure to make it to the highest office of the Indian judiciary. Now, when you look back, now when he comes to an end of his judicial career, do you think he's fulfilled that promise? Or do you think he's left something on the table that he could have perhaps done more? And bear in mind that expectations were exceedingly high, higher than most other judges.
So I would say to you that there are two sides to him when he was Chief Justice. One is the judicial side and one is the administrative side. Now, as far as the administrative side is concerned, I think he's done tremendously well. And not only making things more accessible in the registry, etc., making matters to be listed far more easy than before. But I think his greatest contribution has been making VC compulsory, where after 22 judges started to put it off, and he forced every court to go in for VC, because I think younger lawyers, particularly women lawyers who marry, have young children, they're not able to come to court because of the children at home. I've seen over the last 2 years, a lot of young women lawyers who were not seen before,
Sure,
arguing, not just appearing, but arguing in court. So I think that in the administrative side is his greatest contribution. As far as judicial side is concerned, I think he's one of the most, intellectually one of the best judges we've had in Supreme Court recently. He's done a lot for women rights. The Hadya right to marry, then lifting the ban on Sabri Malai, then making women commission officers, uh, decriminalizing 377, adultery, electoral bond case. These are milestones. Right to privacy definitely are milestones. The problem that I see why he's suddenly coming under some attack is because his tendency to speak outside court uh, is very high. Because he's an intellectual, he tends to give a lot of speeches outside court. And sometimes that doesn't match what he's doing in some judgments. I think that's the only problem. Like the Mandir case saying, I spoke to God now. You can't be as a judge saying, I speak to God and give judgment and not the law. So these are, controversies which he's creating, not necessary. But I do feel that he definitely has made a mark, both on judicial side, administrative side. Yes, every judge can do more, but there's only so much in 2 years that you can do,
Sure. Fair point. An excellent administrator, judge, the debate is still out on that. We'll, of course, get the opinion of some of the other panelists as well. Mr. Prasanna, let me come to you. A few days ahead of his retirement, you've written an interesting piece where you've, again, sought to dissect the judicial side, his functioning on the judicial side. You've critiqued a few judgments that he's come out with. Just taking cue from what Ms. Dutt had pointed out, that he was seen outside the courtroom equally as often as he was seen inside, that there are some judgments which in very important critical matters went in favor of the government, but yet were very smartly crafted in a traditional Justice Chandrachud style. These were some of the thoughts that came out of your piece. Tell us more. How would you review his performance on the judicial side?
Thanks, Ashmit. I agree with Ms. Anuradha that he's possibly one of the most intellectually well-equipped, and at least in terms of the judgments that he's written, judges that we have, which all the more makes it difficult to assess the legacy of judgments that he's leaving behind, which is why I used I put all his judgments, his major judgments, into 3 categories. One category, which I think Ms. Anuradha Dutt has already mentioned, and I won't repeat, are where the reasoning and the rhetoric and the outcome match. That here you have somebody who has a very carefully reasoned, very well thought out, philosophically well articulated judgment, which has an outcome which naturally flows from that. I think Ms. Dutt gave a great example in the privacy case. You could also add the women commissioned officers case, the Sabarimala case, and so on. But there's a second category of judgments which I believe where the rhetoric in the judgment itself, more than what he has said outside courts, does not actually lead to the kind of outcomes that you would expect that that kind of rhetoric would have. Here I'm talking about cases like the abortion case. I'm talking about the marriage equality case, where there is a lot of, very sort of sound thinking, reasoning, and let's face it, very nice sounding liberal logic used. But the eventual outcome in those cases is nothing. Abortion is still criminalized in India, except in very limited circumstances. And that is why you have a lot of women who are running to the high courts to say, please allow us to abort in these circumstances because the doctors are too terrified to carry out abortions. Sure. So you do have these second category of judgments where the reasoning seems sound, but the impact is almost nothing because the relief eventually, which was nothing granted to the parties. There's a third, and this is the hugely controversial element of his legacy, where you have the rhetoric saying one thing, but the outcome of the judgment is diametrically the opposite. And in this category, I would put the Ayodhya judgment. I would put the Article 370 judgment. And I would put even the Loya judgment in this category, where on the one hand, you are saying, I believe in all these principles, but the eventual verdict is in diametrically the opposite direction. Just to take the Article 370 judgment, there are pages and pages and pages about federalism, how important it is, history of Jammu and Kashmir, and so on and so forth. When it comes to actually deciding, is it okay for the union government to put an end to the statehood of a state, the judgment stops dead. Right? There's no reasoning given. There is no final conclusion. Everything stops by saying, okay, the government has said at some point they might give Jammu and Kashmir a statehood back. So I guess it's okay. with the Ayodhya judgment, and I've written about this, well, there is a lot of careful reasoning. Right at the end, you see that the claims made by the Hindus are weighed very differently from the way in which the claims made by the Muslims are. Even though on the face of it,
the criticism is, so the criticism appears to be that the commentary perhaps not consistent with the final outcome.
Exactly.
I'm afraid I have to also get in Mr. Panag on this.
Sure.
Mr. Panag, your quick thoughts. The issue that appears to have been is that there was already a mindset as to what to expect of Justice Chandrachud, courtesy his public appearances. There were quite a lot of them. There was a public perception that was created. You think that perhaps led to exceedingly high expectations, which now, in comparison to the work that he's done, appears to give a sense of a disparity, appears to perhaps point at the direction of perhaps Mr. Justice Chandrachud left something on the table. He could have done more?
I think in terms of our expectations from judges and the judiciary, we've always generally been temperate, and we ought not to be. They are fundamental custodians of our constitutional values, and we must hold them to high standards. I do believe there was both a period of limited political competition, on account of which there was a higher expectation of the Chief Justice of India at this point of time, especially when it came to matters of liberty, and given some of the track record of some of our law enforcement bodies impacting both common citizens, certain cases that were allegedly politically motivated, and also businesses for that matter. And there was a need for a serious rethink on liberty. And while I'll completely endorse what Ms. Dutt said and what Mr. Prasanna said in terms of that Justice Chandrachud is one of the tallest intellectuals we've had, both as a jurist, as a lawyer, and as a judge. On the administrative side, also, I would agree that I think he's left behind a significant legacy that will hold the test of time. Save and except one administrative matter that I am going to pick bones with, which is what his conduct as the master of the roster. And sometime back, when we had judges do a press conference, we spoke, there was significant commentary about that. But today we have judges being sources to news reports. Even on several occasions, judicial propriety has been called into question. For example, very recently we had a landmark judgment which has probably pushed personal property rights the furthest in the last few years. But then you have a propriety question about certain paragraphs not finding their way in, remarks about a former judge of the court, and a challenge therein. So I do believe that these elements are also need to be considered when we look at his administrative legacy. But what I'm going to conclude with, and to come back to the point of expectations, there was a fundamental expectation that habeas corpus, that matters of liberty, would, when they fall before the highest court of the land, be treated fairly, be treated expeditiously, and a manner that was consistent with our law. Justice Chandrachud's defining legacy is going to be that statements made to universities, in lectures, made to the press, in interviews where he would not be cross-questioned, versus his own track record on liberty in the court, are entirely divergent to each other, both on the judicial side and on the master of the roster side.
Right, Mr. Panag, it's an interesting conversation, and this debate will continue on the other side of this short break on the legacy that Justice Chandrachud, India's 50th Chief Justice, has left behind.